Hey everybody, Sam here. I'm going to help you get started installing xStatic into your existing Umbraco website, and we'll be generating static sites before you know it. Now the first thing you need to do is go to your project in Visual Studio, go to Manage NuGet Packages, and what you're going to need to do is search for xStatic. Now what you're going to see is that we have a variety of different xStatic packages added to NuGet. This top one here, xStatic, that is what you need to add if you want to put xStatic into your Umbraco instance to generate static sites. xStatic core is useful if you want to create any custom generators or deployers. We have xStatic Netlify, which as you can imagine deploys to Netlify. xStatic Git, which connects to Git repositories, pushes them up so you can use for things like GitHub pages. We have xStatic FTP, deploys over the file transfer protocol. Adam created an AWS S3 one, which would need to be updated to version 14 for it to work with this tutorial. We have a content API, which is good for if you want to deploy JSON. And then we have the client project, which is used for the new Umbraco 14 headless backend. So what we've done here is we've just installed xStatic, the main package, into our project. And there's a small amount of configuration that we need to do. So if you go to your program CS file, when this runs, we are going to need to configure all of the xStatic services that need to be used. Simply copy and paste in from here. This uses the automatic settings of xStatic. As you can see, we had a using statement at the top, which is required for the extension methods to use. That is all you need to do to set up xStatic. So what we can do is we can run this in IIS Express or however you're running your applications, and what you'll see is that Umbraco still loads up and runs exactly as it would before. As you can see here, our Umbraco site is working as you would expect. Now the only thing that changes is when we log in to Umbraco, we have a new section which will be called xStatic. But what you notice is that that isn't appearing by default, and that's because you need to add it to your user groups for it to show. So what we can do is we can go to our administrator's user group, choose under sections, you see that we've got xStatic, and if you choose that, press submit, that'll get added to your user account and you'll be able to see it. Now this actually isn't the best way to do it with a new feature that we have installed in Umbraco 14. So xStatic 14 has this new secure user groups role. You have to provide the email address of the user that is going to create these roles automatically. So that's what the admin.admin.com is there. I've just put in secure user groups. You use whatever email address that your admin user logs in with. And when we log into Umbraco, what you'll see, so I'm logging in with the admin.com user, xStatic immediately gets added in the xStatic section, and we can see you can start configuring your new sites. Now the reason this is useful is, as you can see here, we have two new user roles, user groups, xStatic admin and normal user. A couple of our sections, so the deployment types and the actions, they are for admins only, and the reason that we've added this new extra permission in, they often include personal access tokens or passwords, and we don't want people getting into those. So what we can see now is we've got the xStatic site section. This is for all the configuration of specific sites that you want to take from Umbraco into an HTML version or other file formats that you can do. Now export types, you don't really have to touch these too much if you just want to generate a basic HTML website, but this defines how a site is going to go from a runtime Umbraco instance to a static HTML site. Deployment targets are where you want to put these static files. So for instance, you would set up a deployment target for your Netlify host, or maybe your Git repository that you want to push to. Actions are used after sites have been deployed for copying files or any other things like that. And we can see here there's a useful config page where you can see what has been installed, because there's a pluginable architecture, and there's a documentation tab where you can read articles on my site. You can see which plugins are available. Okay, so now we're going to have a go at configuring our first ever site. And this is as easy as choosing a site name that you want to reference this by, picking the root node of the site you want to export. So there's only one of these in the Umbraco starter kit. You want to pick all the folders that contain the imagery that is included within this site, and then you want to choose your export format. At the moment, we only have the built-in default HTML website. Now, an important part if you're using a styled site is you need to put in the asset paths of the files, not just the items that you want to be moved, as well as the static generated items. So as you can see here, it was the CSS and the scripts folder, and there are other options which you can do there. We can see we haven't got any deployment targets set yet. Target host name, that is useful for if you want to use explicit links, not just relative ones. So that's now been created. You can see it on the dashboard. You can see it's never been built. So what we can do is we can click the generate button, which will go through the Umbraco tree, and it will generate static HTML versions of those. What we can see now is that there is a folder that has a size, so that includes all the images, all of the HTML there. And what you can do is you can download, and this zips them all up, and we can open it up to see what is included within that static site. So we can see here we've got all the pages, like about us, blog, contact. Inside each of those you can see there's an index.html. This allows the pathing to essentially work the same. And what we can also see is the CSS and the scripts folder that I added to the assets path is also showing. So that is a website that is now static, that we have generated from an existing Umbraco site with no changes. So next what we need to do is we need to deploy this generated static site to a location where we can sort of use that website. I created this folder on my computer. Imagine this is a network drive, and what we're going to do is we are going to use the basic inbuilt deployer type to put our generated website into a folder that maybe we could hook up to IIS, or we could share in any way. So I've pasted this in, chose the file system deployer, and there's nothing more to it. We now have a deployment target that we can go back to our website in the xStatic sites section, and we can edit our demo site by pressing on the little yellow brush. It opens it up. We can scroll down to the deployment target and pick our local deployment option. We can submit this. We can put in the target host name if we had set up a site in IIS to use a specific host name. In this case, I'm just using localhost, so I'm not going to. And what we're going to do is we're going to submit that. That will save it. And we can deploy our website simply by pressing the deploy button on the site that we've just configured. As this is local, it takes basically no time, and we can see here that my folder, which was empty before, is now complete with all the generated files. So just to do a very simple example, show you how this works, I'll just use a node package which starts an HTTP server in a specific folder. We'll take this IP address with its port number, we'll add them to the browser, and what you can see now is we've got our Umbraco site, but if you look closely, just look how fast this site loads. No server-side processing, just immediate serving of the files. But all the links still work as you'd expect, and all the content still displays. So what are actions? Actions in xStatic allow you to perform operations on the files that have been generated after the generation is completed. Now, one really useful way to use this is for not found pages, because they often have to be in a specific place, or you configure your hosting to point to them in that way. So what we're going to do here is I've just created within Umbraco a very simple 404 page. Currently just has a title, and what you'll see is that we can go to the actions section of the site. We can create a new action, call it 404, and what we're going to do is we're going to copy the file that's generated, so in a 404 file, and we're just going to call it 404.html, which is the configuration that I need for my specific site to show 404 pages. So we've created the action. We can now go back to our xStatic site. I'm just setting up my network drive bit again so we can see it. And if we scroll down, we now see that there's this 404 post generation action that we can choose from. I'm now going to generate a site again. That is required. I can deploy that site, and then if I load up this thing, we can now see a 404.html page. With xStatic, one of the benefits we have is that it's very extensible with as many different plugins as you want. So what we can see here, these are the built-in ones that I manage. We have Netlify, Git, and FTP, all of which have deployer functionality built in and all the configuration that goes with that. So what you can see is it's just as simple as, again, in NuGet, installing the corresponding version, make sure it matches the xStatic version that you've got installed. Just apply and accept all of the plugins that are getting put in. Now, you shouldn't have to make any changes to this file. What I've noticed is that if something doesn't seem to be getting picked up, just add a using declaration with xstatic.netlify or xstatic.ftp or xstatic.git to ensure that it does. But in this situation, it works exactly as expected. It just maybe depends on your compiler configuration in your project. So we'll go back to xStatic now that we've got those plugins installed, and as you can see, we now have 3 more deployers than we had before. So we're all set up, and now it comes to just creating new deployment targets with those. So we can create a new deployment target. For instance, we can set up for Netlify, we can create with a Netlify name, and now we see over these different deployers. We can choose Netlify, these are the 2 fields that are required. We can deploy FTP, you see the fields change again, and if we choose Git, we have a different level, a different selection of fields. Each of these can be configured in different deployment types. It's very extensible, anyone can create their own deployers. Documentation for that would be on my website. Some plugins can also include actions. We see the Netlify 404 action, and what this does is very simply puts a page that you want into the correct location that Netlify expects to see your 404 page. So as we did before, we had the 404 index.html page. We can go back to the xStatic sites, we can open up the settings, and now you see we've got 2 of them, and we can switch out 404 for Netlify 404. Build and deploy in exactly the same way you normally would, and you're done. As mentioned earlier, I have plenty of documentation on my website, so you can see here some examples. If you want to extend xStatic to make it do even more clever things than it does outside the box, do go and give it a go. Good luck, hope you have fun and enjoy cheaper and faster Umbraco websites on xStatic.